All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the many teammate members from Modern Management of the Older Adult. We have 3 courses in our geriatric curriculum. We have our 2-day live MMOA. Our next courses, we actually have 2 courses going next weekend, not this weekend, the 5th, the next weekend, the 11th, in Kingman, Arizona, as well as in St. Mary's, Florida. Those are both open courses that still have a couple of seats left. So if you're interested in seeing MMOA live or coming to MMOA live, we encourage you to jump in. Our next cohort of MMOA Essential Foundations, our 8-week online course, starts at the end of August. So super excited to have some of those courses up and running. Very cool to see that we are having multiple MMOA courses going the same weekend, and super excited. I'll be in Florida. Dustin's going to be in Arizona with Jeff. I'm going to be with Julie, and we're just going to have a great time bringing all the topics of conversation around older adults to clinicians in those areas. So today, this has actually been requested, PT on Ice that has been requested for quite some time. And so I thought that we would bring this up. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about sex with older adults and why I think it's important that we potentially, even if you're not a pelvic health physical therapist, that we consider our role as geriatric clinicians within the sexual health space. So sex can be something that's really awkward to talk about. Definitely something that I didn't realize when I was going into the pelvic health space was how much I was going to be troubleshooting a lot of really complex things when it comes to intimacy. And I'm not just talking about penetrative intercourse. You're talking a lot around trauma-informed practice and pelvic pain and dealing with a lot of really big emotions that can kind of come into this space. And that is really hard for some people to talk about. And there's a lot of trust that needs to be developed there. And the therapeutic alliance is going to be so key. And one of the things as allied health professionals that really is such a beautiful thing is that because we get to spend so much time with our clients, with our older adults, sometimes we're the ones that individuals are going to be the most comfortable talking about. And we have such a huge role to play with respect to physical function, not just pelvic health, but physical function in order for older adults to be able to be intimate in the way that they want to. And this kind of goes into my next point is because a lot of older adults are not having these conversations or people are just assuming that older adults are asexual, which is not true, right? We have this general ageist assumption within our society that we don't need to talk about sex with older adults because older adults aren't having sex. And that is not true. Rates of penetrative intercourse, for example, might go down with older adulthood, but intimacy can look different and intimacy can be achieved in a lot of different ways. And we can help troubleshoot that. And so it is a big issue within our society that we have this assumption that older adults are asexual, and that is not true. And I've talked to a lot of individuals who are advocates for individuals with disability, and there's the same issue that is coming up in that space, that they assume that sexual health and participating in sexual intercourse is something that is for the young, able-bodied individual. And because of things like this, the lack of conversation or feeling dismissed, a lot of my older adult clients can feel extremely dismissed. We're seeing that we are having a lot of older adults who are having pain with different sexual activities. We have that older adults are one of the cohorts of individuals that are having the biggest increase in sexually transmitted infections. And so there's a lot of ethical considerations for us to think about from our medical system as a whole with respect to how we're advocating for sexual health and allowing those conversations to happen within our healthcare system. And we are definitely a big contributor. We can be a big contributor to that. And it's really important for us to talk about. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make this really clinically applicable and talk about what you could do if you are a pelvic PT and what you can do specifically if you are not. Because what can happen is that in pelvic PT, this can be kind of like a silo. And if you're working with an older adult and something like this comes up, first of all, of course, making a referral can be really helpful to a pelvic PT that you know within your area, especially one that you know is working with older adults, which should be every pelvic PT, for being honest. But some people market themselves in different ways. Um, but what can happen and what is a huge barrier is if you're working with somebody who's homebound or in assisted living skilled nursing, they may not have access to a pelvic PT, or they're using all of their money, like their financial resources, to see you and don't have any other means with respect to transportation, financial barriers, etc., to be able to go see a pelvic PT. So ideally, we can have that referral pathway. We can be talking about that with other providers. But I would hope that, just like we say that every PT is a Jerry PT, I think that every PT is a pelvic health PT, but just the way that we're going to tackle these conversations are going to be helpful. So if you are not a pelvic PT, what are some things that might be coming up when we are talking about sex with older adults? So the first thing is that older adults may come to you with different complaints around physical function with respect to participating in sexual activity. So this might have nothing to do with the pelvic floor and everything to do with they just had a knee replacement, and the position that they enjoy having sexual intercourse is missionary. And if they are on top, they cannot put the pressure on their knees. And so they haven't been participating in physical or in sexual activity because of that barrier. Right. And so, an example that we talk about all the time is that after a joint replacement, a knee replacement, kneeling is one of the issues or the positions that individuals have the most amount of complaint with respect to their quality of life, because it impacts their ability to pray, to garden, to get on and off the floor, or potentially to participate in sexual activity with their partner. So what we can be doing is, if this is starting to come up, if they are, or are we screening for, are you having any issues with your sexual health or function as a consequence of some of your physical musculoskeletal aches and pains? Can we work through some of those? Can we work on using padding and the place at which you're participating in sexual activity to allow you to get into those positions? Can you, instead of, we're going to work on graded exposure with respect to getting you back to kneeling in order to get back to sexual activity, but can we try a sideline position? Can we try and get you in standing on the edge of the bed so that you're still in a missionary type position, but you're not having that compression on your new prosthetic knee, that knee joint, so that you can continue to participate in sexual activity without the pain being your most predominant thought process during that time where you're are hoping to connect with your partner. So this might be a big barrier. Another one is a pain with weight bearing through the upper extremity. Can we work on different positions? Can we work on getting them into fists, on not on as soft surfaces, because that's going to put you into a little bit more wrist extension? Can you, again, change the positions and work through some of those conversations? And the first time this comes up with an older adult, you might feel really uncomfortable, but trust me, they're feeling more uncomfortable, but it's something that is obviously extremely important to them. And we want to make sure that we're able to have those conversations in a really respectful and professional way, and allow them to be able to explore their sexuality in the way that they want to. And so I'm talking about sexual positions with respect to penetrative intercourse in a heterosexual cis relationship. But, there's going to be a lot of different, June 1st, it's the beginning of Pride Month. And so we're going to have potentially other relationship dynamics that we're going to be working through. And having those conversations and being very open about some of those conversations can be extremely helpful, especially in an older adult demographic where some of the bias and potential prejudice around individuals who are not in heterosexual relationships can be quite high. And so having those conversations and being open to having those conversations is going to be really important. I think our occupational therapy colleagues can do a really wonderful job of, screening for issues with sexual function. And we can really come alongside them and help work through any barriers and optimize facilitators around the musculoskeletal system with respect to painful intercourse with achy joints and painful joints. And then the other thing is that this might be the first circumstance where individuals are talking to you about sex being painful. They may not be going or contributing or participating rather in penetrative intercourse because it's painful. And dyspareunia, which is painful intercourse, is a big and a very common complaint in pelvic health, and something that a lot of our older adults don't recognize, that there is a lot that we can do. And a lot of it comes down to education, right? And so even if you're not a pelvic health therapist, normalizing their complaint, saying, you may think that you're alone with this and that there's something wrong with you, but it is a very common issue that happens with female clients across different areas of their life. Post-menopause is actually one of those times in your life where you're going to be seeing that this estrogen deficiency during menopause is actually going to be an increased risk factor for painful intercourse, and have conversations about what that means, right? So with respect to pain with sex, dyspareunia in a postmenopausal female, what we're seeing is that estrogen deficiency is going to contribute to vaginal atrophy, which is going to, and the lack of estrogen is going to cause issues with ligamentous integrity around the pelvis. And it's going to contribute to dryness within the vaginal canal. All things that can contribute to painful intercourse. And so we have, some individuals will go the hormone replacement route, and we can talk about those options. Some people will use topical estrogens. This is more of a conversation with their physicians. And then we can also talk about things like lubricants versus moisturizers. And so when individuals are in an estrogen deficient state, they can have a lot of chafing and redness and irritation around their vulva that can be really uncomfortable when they're going into different types of physical function, but also into sexual activity. And so moisturizers are a type of lubricant for individuals who are experiencing a lot of vaginal dryness that can allow them to, it's meant for longer durations and more day-to-day activities. So if individuals, for example, like to bike ride and they're having a lot of chafing, you might be able to recommend a good, high quality, good material moisturizer. If individuals are having a lot of pain with sexual activity, then we're going to be going more towards a lubricant route and talk about, the differences between lubricants and moisturizers. If you have an individual with pain, or even if pain is not the primary complaint, some of our older adults can want that connection with their partner that comes with intimacy and sexual activity, but are experiencing a drop in libido that they are looking for answers about, right? And sometimes, again, this is another area where older adults get very commonly dismissed, and they say, well, it's normal as you get older to have a loss of libido. And while, yes, sexual drive does tend to decrease with older age, that does not mean that we cannot work towards having different interventions to help with libido. And again, this comes oftentimes to some of the education and talks about the role of our sex hormones in libido, testosterone in men and estrogen, progesterone in females, and its role in libido. And so a decline in estrogen is going to oftentimes link to a decline in libido. But we know, especially for females, there's a lot more than just the mechanical, pathways around arousal that are leading to a person's perception of, willingness or wanting to engage in sexual activity. And so we can talk about all those things. I oftentimes will make a recommendation to get a book by Emily Nagoski called Come As You Are that talks about all these different inputs that create this sense of safety and intimacy and how that can link to libido with anybody of any age, but is really relevant for our older adults. And so we can talk about those types of things. Kind of a next step there is that we can be talking about how intimacy can look different or change. I've had older adults who are in their 80s who have met a new partner in their early 80s, and their intimacy was to undress and lie very close to each other and discuss things that have happened in their life. And that sense of skin on skin was something that was very calming, was creating this bond between the two of them. And they oftentimes said, "Oh, I've told some people about that, and they tell me that that's inappropriate or that I shouldn't be doing that." And again, that is completely ageist and assuming that older adults are not are asexual individuals, which is not true. And that intimacy is just so important for social connectedness. And so we can talk about how, things like foreplay and things like, that type of skin to skin contact can be extremely stress relieving. It can be a great way to facilitate bonding and connection in a consensual relationship. And that can be a way to bridge towards more or more exploration within sexual activity so that older adults can feel that connection that they are potentially craving if libido is low. And so all of these things had nothing to do with doing an internal assessment. A lot of them were related to kind of education around what's going on with respect to aging physiology in the reproductive system. And is sometimes it is painful to know how little education we get about our own bodies and how little education our older adults get about what's happening to their own aging bodies. And so being that bridge for them and talking through this with them, this can happen. I've talked a lot about female clients, but this can happen with male clients too, right? This change in prostate size, whether it's cancerous or not, can lead to things like urinary dribbling, which can be extremely embarrassing and become a barrier to sexual activity. You can also have individuals who have what's called climacto urea, and it's more common in older adults, which is the loss of urine when climaxing. And so during orgasm, they can have some change in cervical fluid or ejaculation for men, but you can also have loss of urine. And so that can be something that, again, we can refer to pelvic PT about and have these conversations. It is so, so important. I've kind of thrown a lot at you, but I wanted to make this really clinically relevant about how we can get involved without needing to be a pelvic PT. Because a lot of the clinicians that I talk to in Jerry PT with MMOA Live, especially in MMOA Essential Foundations Advanced Concepts, like they don't have access to a pelvic PT based on their setting, based on their finances, based on their transportation availability. And they still have these questions. And so they're going to be coming to you, or they're going to feel like they can't come to you. And opening up these conversations and, maybe like probing about pelvic and reproductive health can be really important and can be such a great way for you to increase a person's quality of life in a way that it is potentially considered non-traditional, but we should probably be thinking about this in a very traditional sense. So, kind of bringing this full circle, like a lot of our interventions are one to know when sex is painful or when individuals are having trouble with sexual activity, whether that's musculoskeletal aches and pains or with things like penetration or tampon insertion, toy insertion, finger insertion, whatever type of sexual activity a person is trying to engage in. We need to start talking about sexual activity and working through some of those positions and know that that might be a barrier to activities that people are trying to do outside of maybe what our traditional thoughts are on ADLs and IADLs. There's a lot of education that we can do about aging physiology within the reproductive system that can allow our older adults to feel very heard and not dismissed when it comes to their sexual function. It is a very big problem around ageism within our medical system, that there is a underlying thought process that older adults are asexual. And that is not true. Our sexual activity and sexual intimacy are not just for able-bodied younger individuals. Sexual activity can be explored in a variety of different types of relationships in a variety of different ways. And we need to not make that assumption. we can really, whether we're referring to pelvic PT or starting to screen for some of these issues, we can have a huge, huge role in Geri PT to help our older adults. And it might be in the musculoskeletal system, right? Just like that kneeling and joint replacement and avoiding sexual activity because of pain with a joint, knee joint, and getting into certain positions, we can really help to remove some of those barriers to allow older adults to explore their sexual being and identity in a way that feels good for them. All right, I went a little bit long, I always do. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. I know this is probably not talked about as much as it should be, even in the pelvic health space. But I think it's really important that we're talking about these types of conversations. Was a PT on Ice episode that was requested. So obviously these conversations are coming up in clinical practice. I maybe take for granted the fact that I talk to a lot of older adults about this type of thing. But try and screen for some of these things, or talk to your OT colleagues, or if you're an OT listening, tell us how you screen for sexual function when it comes to your older adults. And let's continue to have these conversations and normalize these conversations when it comes to our older adults. All right, have a great day, everybody. And I hope that you all are recovering from MRF. I am still in that 2-day sore, but I'm slowly on the mend. So I hope that you all are too. And we will talk to you later. Bye.